All right, welcome back to the Business of Laravel podcast, where I talk to business leaders who are working in and within Laravel. My guest today is Branick Weix, CEO of Diagonal. Branick, would you introduce yourself and also tell us who are you and what's your business?
Awesome. Thanks for having me on, Matt. Nice to meet everyone. My name's Branick. I'm the CEO of Diagonal, and we're building what we call personalized software for small businesses in America. You can kind of think of traditional service-based industries, things like lawn service providers, yoga studios, plumbers, HVAC, etc. I also previously started a company called Aryeo, which we can spend a few minutes talking about if you want.
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah. Let's see. That was kind of your classic startup story from college dorm room with your friends, learning how to code, and then growing that business and learning how to grow a business and get one started. And then we ultimately sold that business in 2023 to Zillow, which was
NBD. Yeah,
quite the journey, though. It was quite fun.
I can imagine.
Lots of learnings on that. And that's where I first met or got introduced to just Laravel as a whole was in college, actually. And kind of picking it up from that side, which I can spend a few minutes diving into if you want. But where do you want to go?
I think that going through your backstory would be really interesting because that's not always where we start. But I do think that Diagonal's new, right? And I want us to talk about it at Diagonal.
Yep.
But part of the reason why you're on a Business of Laravel podcast is what you've done. And then that also kind of informs what you're doing. So if you wouldn't mind sharing just if as much of the backstory of areas you're interested in sharing, especially as it relates to kind of using Laravel in it.
And it was interesting because the last business we built on Laravel, I would say kind of accidentally, and then starting this business now, we kind of had more of the choice of okay, what do we want to build in? And we chose Laravel again for the new business Diagonal as well. So, but winding the clock back, I was studying computer science in college, and I wanted to study computer science because I always wanted to make things and I like to build things. Yeah. But I was taking all these classes and they were interesting, learning the theory of things, but I never really felt like I was building stuff, Yeah. And there was one guy on campus that everyone would go to. If you had an idea or something, you go ask him. He was the go-to person for how to build an app or something. Yeah. And I asked him, I was like, hey, I've taken some CS classes. I got this idea for this software I want to build for, photography companies. Do you have any recommendations for me? And he's like, go learn PHP. He's like, no one else is going to tell you this, but go learn PHP.
Wow.
And he said, go check out Code Course. And I go on the Code Course's website, which, thank you, Alex, if he's listening here. And the thing that resonated with me right away was all the tutorials were focused around building real world applications for businesses, right? It wasn't like I was taking another computer science course or something. And I pretty quickly fell in love with that. I joined the Laravel Boston group. I went to my first Laracon that summer. And it felt like for the first time, I still had no idea really what I was doing on the day to day. It took me a good probably couple years to learn the basics of web dev. Yeah. But it felt like I could piece things together for how to build something. Even our first version of that software, that was almost a decade ago now. It was breaking all the time. I didn't know the difference between a local database and a production database. I kid you, this is kind of a fun story. One of the core features of that first version was people could upload pictures and then we'd resize them in different formats. So they could send them off to other people. And we couldn't for the life of us get that to work. It was pictures were coming. We'd have hundreds of pictures that are 50 megabytes each, and it would just crash the servers.
Oh, no.
So I'd set up a text message that would go to my phone when the user uploaded pictures. I would SSH into the server. I would compress all the files on the server, and then I would relink to that, and then I would trigger the email to go off to the customer so that they could go download it. And I did that for months as we tried to figure out how to make that work.
I love that.
Which, it's kind of a fun one to look back on now.
That's whoever it was that shipped without having the ability to pay. They're like, look, let's just get this in people's hands and start taking their money for it. But
exactly.
That's brilliant.
Exactly. Yeah, so that was fun. We had a good time building that. And then beginning of this year, I started working on this new company called Diagonal. Very early days. We're a few months into it. We've got our first kind of wave of engineers on board. So we've got about 8 engineers now. Pretty much all people, more or less, from the Laravel ecosystem, which honestly was probably a big part of the decision of, what tech stack do we want to use here across the board? And for me, one of the benefits of going with Laravel is you get kind of these pre-vetted people in the industry that they're coming in with a certain set of standards that are all right, there's just a way to do some of these things. I don't want to waste resources and time rebuilding auth or cron jobs or all this stuff. I just kind of want to start with the batteries included thing, which I think has been the right decision so far. We did make the jump. Last business we were using Vue. This one now we're using React on the front end and Inertia.js. We just love that stack. So it's been very pleasant for us so far.
So you're a very tech focused CEO. What was your role at Aryeo?
CEO, I was not the CTO though. So Brendan Quinlan was. And early days, that was just all of us hacking together, building stuff.
Yeah.
I would say I'm I always strive to be the worst engineer on the team. Like, that's the goal. And I think I am. So that's good.
Love that.
And it also is I think a helpful, I'll kind of, come check in on things. And if it's too confusing for me, usually it's a good litmus of maybe we need to simplify it or something, or figure out a different way to do it.
Love that.
But I'm usually probably just oriented around, I want to get something to the customer's hands, right?
Mm-hmm.
I code so I can build product for them. And that's kind of the mental model for me of all right, we need to ship this thing. And then I learned to program to do that. So that's kind of how I think about it on the day to day.
Yeah. So you just recently went through a round of hiring. I mean, you mentioned, kind of your first wave of engineers. What do you think is a common misconception, or maybe just what do people not know about how to hire well? Because I think people are struggling with hiring engineers, right? And you seem pretty happy with what
I've
what you
never
got.
struggled with hiring engineers. Maybe that, and it's so odd to me of that. And in part because we kind of have the right level of focus, right? We're not just hiring any full stack developer. I think that's just too broad. For me, the focus of, someone that knows Laravel for even the full stack roles, that is a perfect litmus of getting the pool to something reasonable. Right. And for us, the numbers, I just tweeted the other week, some of our numbers from this hiring round. It's usually about 100 applications to one for every hire or so. And I kind of went through the numbers. That's been pretty consistent over the last decade for us. Yeah. But let's see here. On that process as a whole, we always use Larajobs. That's usually been our consistently the highest quality people, which has been great. And the other thing I tell a lot of startups, even outside of Laravel and whatnot, is go look at your packages that you use in your company. And then go look at the maintainers and the people that contribute to those packages. And those are the people you should outreach to. And everyone's why did I never think about that? It's if someone's spending their nights and weekends doing this for fun, that is a great person to have on the team. They're you're going to pay me to do more of this? And it's great. It's fun. And you get people that enjoy the work, right? So that's probably my biggest filter.
Because they're in the guts of it. Yeah.
Exactly.
That's very cool.
That's probably our biggest hiring litmus, I'd say, people that actually enjoy the work and that you get the value from it, which it's fun when you get a team of people like that.
Yeah, that's very cool. It's funny because one of the questions I normally ask is, what's the most exciting thing you've dealt with this year technically? And I'm your entire company is the most exciting technical thing. How much do you want to share about Diagonal? You're going to keep things under the wraps, or you want to share a little bit?
I mean, it's not intentionally secret. We're just early stages. So I'm always a fan of the proofs in the puddings. I want to get a product out to customers and share more there. A lot of the thesis around what we're building came from this feeling that most businesses in America, and just even, running our last company, there was a certain turning point, I think, in the company. Once we started serving thousands of businesses at that certain number, the job and my job all of a sudden became no longer just kind of setting the roadmap and the future direction. It also became managing this massive wave of current customers and all these feature requests and things, which I'm sure probably every engineer listening at a company today resonates with oh, you know what? The sales team just needs one more feature to get this customer over the line.
And then
right?
we'll finally be able
one more, right? It's always just one more. And we literally had a feature request board at our last company with over 3,000 feature requests on it. Which sounds it was a lot. It was more than any full-time person could handle, even reviewing those kinds of things. And where it kind of led me, and especially over the last year, reflecting on everything and what did I want to work on next, it led me to this realization that most software is built for this concept of an average customer, and that there really is no such thing as an average customer. That's an entirely fictitious concept that we've just kind of invented. And you're constantly making trade-offs, right? And you think you look at your software then, the majority of tickets and stuff that goes out the door is usually just configuration related. It's we got this customer that wants to send a customer review email every Tuesday. This one wants to send it once a month. This one only wants to send it to new customers. And the engineers working with PMs and the designer to come up with an interface for all these configuration settings. Then you got one customer with something custom over here that wants this. And it's all this noise. And then all of a sudden you're just trapped. You're we gotta get rid of this tech debt, right?
Yeah.
And that ultimately led us to what we want to build with Diagonal, which is a piece of software that is designed from the ground up around configuration, where every single piece of the software, from the front end to the back end to the business logic, is highly configurable and runs in a very dynamic way. There's still a lot of unknowns with it, and we're kind of proving it out. But we don't want to have to write controllers. I don't want to have anyone have to write actual code there. So our approach has been to define kind of our own abstract kind of config, if you will. Every business gets their own config. And then we're building the engine today that kind of runs those configs. So instead of us writing controllers by hand, routes by hand, you can define configs very quickly. You can manipulate them. Businesses can have different ones. And then you can run that for all of your customers. Kind of like a Nova-esque setup, I'd say, on that kind of that meta level. But like, I try to take that all the way through for an entire application. So it's been technically hard. It's been fun though, finding people that are excited about that. If you're listening and you're interested in that kind of work, give me a follow and whatnot. But it's been fun getting the early things together for that.
And that's cool, because one of the things that is curious to me is the future of no code and low code, given AI, and also given a lot of unsuccessful attempts for people to launch projects using low code and no code, when it turns out they're good for a demo, but they don't often kind of work for real life. And one of the reasons I think that is because they work for the one use case that they're for, and they don't work for a lot of other scenarios. And so a low code or no code scenario where you're building an app just for you makes more sense. And it's interesting because you guys aren't a no code or low code platform, but in some ways it's very similar, because you're allowing people to customize something that's just for them. And then you've also got engineers on the back end ensuring that the whole thing is working smoothly. So it's sort of like the benefits of both, right? Like they're building their thing their way, but you've got real engineers actually ensuring that their thing their way is going to be a viable set of configuration options.
Exactly. And there's still a lot of unknowns on like how you pull that off. And like some customers are more or less technical than others. So, some people, it's going to be more kind of like an agency-like relationship. And like bringing that. And like, I think this has actually been proven out. You look at like the large ERPs out there and whatnot, like they've been building and shipping relatively custom software for like large organizations for a while. I think now with AI and these other things, you can kind of see that move down market. I honestly think like Shopify is a great example of bringing the power of customization and e-commerce to a whole lot of businesses in a relatively flexible system without needing to know how to code and all those other things. So we'll see where it takes us, but it's been a fun early journey so far, at least.
I love that. So I want to go back to kind of where you're coming from a little bit, because you are young. You have built and sold SaaS to a major player that everybody knows about. I mean, you could say, hey, I was just on a podcast with my buddy who sold software to Zillow. And people are going to understand that's a big deal. And that's not often the case for a lot of us. And so you kind of made it there pretty young. One of the things that I often ask in this podcast, but I know people are going to be curious about this one, is how do I become the next Branick, right? Like I'm up and coming and I'm just trying to learn how to code. How do I do what he did? So I often ask about advice or books or articles and stuff like that. I do want to go there, but I just want to lead with, if someone asks you that question, how do I see my life go in the trajectory that yours has? What would you tell them to start with?
It's a good question. It's something I kind of always myself, I knew I wanted to build, a company one day, right? That was kind of always the pipe dream. And then like these things, they just like, they just kind of happen upon themselves. Like everyone's like, oh, when did you have like the light bulb moment? I'm a firm believer there's no such thing as a light bulb moment. I don't think that exists. I think it's just fictitious. If you ever hear like a founder saying, oh, I was on a walk and I had this light bulb. No, I don't think it exists. Like it is an accumulation of hundreds and thousands of small decisions every single day that eventually kind of get you there, right? And like that's usually my biggest advice. Like I do meet with a lot of students and people working on starting their own companies and things. And like usually the first thing is, if you haven't got started on it, just get started. Like you don't need to, like the metaphor I like to use is the train is leaving the station, and like you just kind of paint the picture of where the train's going, and people are going to jump on along the way. Maybe you don't know how to code, right? Like I talk to a lot of students that don't know how to code. Thankfully now there are a lot of, the AI tools making it more accessible, so you can use some of those tools out there. But there's a lot of ways to prove things out in the business too in advance. I tell people, like, if you're interested in a market, maybe you don't know how to code or build a product, just call the business owners and say, hey, I'll run your website for you. Or I'll run your Facebook ads for you. Like that's literally what I did before we got started. I ran Facebook ads for like 10 different companies just to learn about their business. And then I was like, oh, now I could automate this, and I got a relationship I can build with. So I like that approach of figuring out novel ways to work with your customers that, if you're not quite there yet, or maybe you got a job or some other commitments that you can't get around. I think that's good. And then I've got a good friend that I think puts it nicely. And it's like when you're starting a company, you're either a builder or a seller. And I think first ask yourself, which one are you? Which camp are you in? And then know that you're never going to do enough of the other thing. You will just never come close to it. And like your entire job every day is compensating for that fact that you're never going to do enough of that other thing. And like the pendulum will never swing. Ideally, you find a co-founder that like balances it, right? And you got one of each. That's great. Or just know in the back of your head, like, even if you think you're doing it, like you're just never going to do enough of the other thing. And so like that was one of my insights from this last business of like, I wish I started sales sooner, because it's tempting and it's fun just to keep building and building and building. But yeah.
I mean, I love that insight, and I especially think it's true in the Laravel community. We have a community absolutely chock full of builders, and there's not a lot of people who understand sales. And I'm not saying they don't exist, but it's a community. In the end, it's a community of engineers, and unlike a lot of communities of engineers, we've got an entrepreneurial spirit and a set of tooling that allows you to build your app solo or with a very small team in a way that you can't elsewhere. But that just further exposes the fact that it's still just engineers building it who are like, yeah, I have a completely functioning app that is super stable, really well thought out, built it in 6 months, and I don't know how to get anybody to know about it. So,
It feels awkward, but just like, maybe it's hard picking up the phone, but even just DMing people and getting it out there, like, always a fan of that. I wish I saw more projects out there charging more money. I think we have this, like, there's not enough projects charging an appropriate amount of money in the Laravel community. Maybe that's a hot take, but I really wish everyone charged a bit more, especially for like the business licenses of things. Like when I go through the bills every month of things of like what we pay for and the value we get from it, typically, like if it's a good piece of software stack, like even I remember I've told the Laravel team, like, hey, we do not pay enough for Forge. Like, now they've got cloud, which I'm excited to try with Diagonal, but like, some of these tools, like, boy, they give you so much value, and don't be afraid you can always lower prices. It's much easier to lower them. So start with some high price points and see where it goes.
Okay. So that's all really good. I want to keep kind of digging into how does someone become the next Branick? So are there any books, specifically written books? I mean, is that how you learn?
I do like to read a lot. I don't listen to any podcasts. So it's interesting. I will read the transcript of podcasts though. So I will pull the transcript and then read it. So I really just like reading mostly.
Yeah, reading guy,
For this new business, I've been reading a lot of old papers, which has been kind of fun. It's like old research papers from like the 60s and 70s, which has been very fun for me. Of like, I think it's interesting. They did a lot of research on just like how people interact with computers early on. And like there was so many constraints because you didn't have beautiful 4K displays. You didn't have any like large memory or anything. So like it forced you to really think about the root of the problem. So I've had fun reading that stuff. There's always like some basic startup books out there, like your 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel. That's like a good one. You got your Paul Graham essays to read. But like, the other place that you can jump in for content, like I'm in a ton of Facebook groups with potential customers. There's all these like small business owner Facebook groups out there. And whatever you're like kind of exploring, like, I don't know where the community is for different things, right? For us, it was these Facebook groups, but there's different ones. Like, I love getting in those and just reading through the comments and like what people are posting, like what their problems are is like a good way to learn about it. I kind of oscillate on the reading and listening. Sometimes it's good just to make things too, just be more on the producing side of stuff versus the consuming side.
Okay. So you mentioned a lot of things that have to do with how you become the entrepreneurial CEO type. Do you do much people management? And if so, what has the process of growing as a manager of people kind of look like for you?
Yeah. Especially the last business, by the time we sold, we probably had about 50 people on the team or so. I started it when I was 19 or 20. So I was usually the youngest person. I remember our first like company retreat, like I couldn't rent the car because I was too young. It was like, oh, this is interesting. For me, like I really resonate with people, and I try to like paint that picture of where is the train going. And then, my job is just to help the train get there and help everyone kind of do their different pieces of the job really. And go around and like, okay, what are the biggest blockers for everyone? And can I kind of get out of the way and do that? So I try to be pretty hands off. Some things I'm pretty hands on though. There's no doubt about that. But I do find like the type of people that get excited, like doing like the hard thing, like the challenge itself, like I usually really resonate with those people, and they go super far too at the company. I'd say like, some of our best hires over the years were always people that like one of our best sales reps ever. He started on customer support. And we could just tell immediately, like he was just going above and beyond with the customers and doing it in such a way. It was like, oh my gosh, we got to move him over to sales. And he just took off, and he was one of the best sales reps then. Even like, like at Diagonal, our current head of engineering, Owen, he started with us. He came in as like a full stack engineer on the Aryeo team pretty early on. And Owen has such a wonderful perspective of like keeping in the customers in mind always. And I think I always notice that. I'm like, all right, I got to just keep giving Owen more of like, keep taking on more. And now he's running the engineering team at Diagonal, which has been great. So, in terms of my people management, I like to find interesting people. I like to see what interests them, and then hopefully I can give them more of that, and hopefully take away the things that aren't interesting, and hopefully that,
Well, it makes a ton of sense. Okay, I know that this is. Well, no. I have a guess of where this might go, but you recently had a tweet that kind of went a little bit viral, and I won't specifically mention the tweet, but I have a question.
Okay, yeah.
And I'm curious whether it lines up with this tweet or not. One of the things I'd like to ask is, what is one piece of advice you have for other people who are doing their business using Laravel? So other business owners, founders, whatever, who are using Laravel. And, we'll talk about the spicy tweet if that's not it, so I shouldn't even mention that. But if someone just said, hey, you know what, I'm running a business, I'm using Laravel too, what have you found about the specifics of running a business using Laravel that you think more people should be knowing or should stop doing or whatever?
I think sticking to the standards as best as you can is great. Like, that is the intentional benefit of it, like to do it in an opinionated way. I actually think there's this whole other benefit that's now coming true with all the AI models, where if you are doing things in the standard way, it's much easier for the models to keep doing it in the standard ways because they've seen it already a whole lot of different ways. And yes, there are like a lot of AI tooling around, JavaScript and some of these things, but there's so many different ways to do things in those things that it's like becomes just chaotic. Like, I look at some of my friends' code base and like, this is just chaos. I don't know how you guys keep track of all this. So like, stick to the extent that you can, like all the built-in stuff. Like, that has never served us wrong at all. I mean, some things we change up. Like, we usually go to we use like the Internaki modules package. We use domains in most of our projects. Like, we do like having a little bit breaking things up there, but sticking with that. And then I think just not being afraid to be like unopinionated, like, hey, we're building with Laravel. Like, that is actually part of the company. Like, that is the intent here. Like for us, it's not just like the tech decision, but it's as I talked about earlier, the people hiring decision too. Like, actually embracing and running with that. Like, go to Laracon, sponsor it, get a booth, do things with the community. Come meet you, do things like this. Like, just lean into it, I think, versus, we're just building software with this thing, and like, kind of, it is what it is, right? But lean into it, and it becomes a big advantage, I think, pretty quick.
That's great. And you mentioned earlier that when you were hiring, you tried to hire people you try to get the benefit of hiring people who know Laravel and who are kind of adopted that way of thinking. Have you all tried hiring people from outside the Laravel world and try to kind of like teach them on the fly? Or you're like, no, we kind of want you to know when you come in?
Yeah, we have tried to teach. Honestly, we've never done a good job, or had to, I guess, of like training like more junior entry level roles into senior people. And like, I would like that to happen at Diagonal. Like, I never really did that with the last company. It was more of like, we always leaned to pretty senior people, honestly. And we kind of had the benefit that we were able to get senior people, which was nice. But like, I think as long as you lay things out in a very clear way, like, we do have one engineer that came on that's more front end focused, and he came from PHP world, just not Laravel. So he was able to pick up Laravel quite easily and learn that stuff. And like, I don't know, it's more about just how you think, right? And I think, bring it back to it versus then like separately how you implement the code usually. So I do think it's quite possible for people to pick it up, and like inertia, like that's kind of a unique thing for within our little community, like learning how does that interact with React and whatnot. It kind of takes a second to figure that out once you get going, but then once you do, it's it makes a lot of sense, I think. So I don't have too much advice on that in particular, thoughts.
Okay. Well, you mentioned that you'd be curious to hire juniors, but you haven't before. I'm going to totally put you on the spot.
Yeah.
If I had to give you, 10 juniors right now, what are the things that you would look for in a junior that make you most interested in bringing them onto the team?
Well, it was interesting, even on like this last round of hiring, right? It was the first time I hired kind of in the age of AI, and we ended up with so many applications that answered our questions perfectly. And I was like, what do I do with this? Normally, I'd read the questions first, and that was my filter. That was my first filter to like, who do we want a phone screen?
Yeah.
Unbelievable. And it was all just AI answers for a lot of these, right?
Yeah.
So we said, okay, let's add a new step into the interview process. And I don't want to call it like an IQ test. It was more like a thinking test, I guess, where I literally took questions from the SAT, from the LSAT, from logic puzzles, and we put it together into like a 20 to 30 minute little test. And it's a monitored test, so you can't access any other tools. Kind of locks your browser out. And we gave it to people. And the thing that we were looking for is like, okay, how do you approach problems, and can you do it in a somewhat abstract way? Like, more like are you aware of like the process of thinking, I guess, and like how do you lay those things out? Like that is one thing that we look for, and I think that'll be even more important because it's less of like, do you know how to technically implement this specific detail? Like, you can learn that eventually, but like, are you going to know to reach for the right kinds of things to help you get to that point?
Yeah,
that's one thing. One interview question, I guess I'm going to give it away now. Owen always asks this, which I think is a brilliant question. He says, hey, you just merge something into production and the app starts crashing, like 500 errors everywhere. What do you do?
Yeah.
Right. And the answer that most people give is like, I'm going to pull up the logs here and look at this thing or that thing. And like, they start diving into like the engineering technical bit. And the answer we're usually looking for is, our customers are hurting right now. we're going to make sure we revert that first. We'll figure it out later. Yep. Let's roll it back. And that's probably, I'd say sub 10% of people say that.
Yeah.
It's pretty rare answers. So like, we try to figure out ways to like look at like, all right, how would, like, where does your mind jump to in its default state?
Yeah. That's really good. Yeah. I've been telling people for a long time, I have never hired in the age of AI. We have brought people on in this time period, but it's always been for referrals. We've never done like a full, and we usually get somewhere between 300 and 500 applicants per job posting, and we usually can get probably 3 or 4 good people out of that. So even if we're just hiring one, we hire one, and then we just hang on to the other's information for the next time we need another person. And I'm very nervous about what that's going to do for my hiring process. So and I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what it's going to do.
You got to change it a little bit, which, it's good and bad. The rest of it kind of goes normal then, once you filter through.
So this is also, I think, the first Business of Laravel podcast I've done since AI has the level of really prominence in the industry that it does right now. So I got to ask you, if somebody came along in either of the extremes, the extremes being just an AI maximalist who says, AI is going to write all of our code in the future. My job is purely just to prompt AI and correct some of their stuff. Or an absolute minimalist who says, I refuse to use any AI. I think it's melting our brains. Yeah. First of all, which of the two would you prefer? And second of all, would you give either of them a corrective if you had them? Or do you think those are all valid ways to think about it?
I think you definitely have to be using it to some extent. Like, I think going forward, we will not, if we have someone in an interview that is like, oh, I won't touch it, like we're just done. Yeah. Okay. So I'll be pretty blank on that one, I think, or point blank there. I think I'm personally probably at least 2 times more effective with everything on the day-to-day, like in terms of like raw output of like the programming side. Now, it's interesting because more of my day is spent thinking and planning, and like even with pen and paper and then going into stuff, which I like. Like, I like that stuff. I don't like writing if statements by hand and like doing things like that's not why I was put on this earth. And like maybe some people love that, great, but like that's not what I want to do. I don't want to do like all these random little conditionals or remember the format for this thing. Now I want to like design products and ship products, right? And like even on the in the last 2 months, so we were using a bunch of different tools, but AI is now the second largest independent contributor to our code base of like entirely AI drafted PRs, like full stack all the way through. So I can run down some of those tools if it's interesting. We've had a ton of success with Devon, which I think early on some people tried Devon, and this is, I think it's devon.ai might be the website. Some people, they kind of loose results on that, but what we found is as long as you take the time of like setting it up and giving it the context, we've had really excellent results. And this remains true across all the models. I think a lot of people just go plug it into a Laravel project like, oh, do this for me. Like, oh, I didn't do it great, right? Like, we haven't shipped a product production so far. We've got over 600 tests and I think like almost 3,000 assertions in the code base today. Like, wow. The level of like coverage we have for that is so that we can have the AI just run and build out features and give us confidence on things. So like for Devon, like we spent a couple of weeks, Owen did, going through setting up context files for it. Like, here's the rule files for the back end, for the front end. Here's our standards. Like, there's Laravel Pint, there's Rector, there's all these linting things out there. Take them first, those things, not the AI things. I say take them to the max extreme that you can take them. And like, you don't want people thinking about like the style to name functions or any of that. Like, that should all be automated ideally. And you get errors when that stuff is. Like, dial those levers up and then go through and just document your rules. So like, I'd say about 60 or 70% of our team is using Cursor, and then other engineers are using PHP Storm and Claude Code with it. Okay. And we've got different kind of subfolders for all of our rules. So we've got back-end rules, front-end rules, database rules. We've got package rules too for like packages that we use heavily. Okay. And like, you can even in Cursor, you can link to specific packages, so it gets injected with context as you're doing work. Yeah. And then like, for me, the most mind-boggling thing has been like the workflow. I'd say for about half of the things I work on now, I will first go to Linear or Jira, whatever you're using. We use Linear. I'll write up the ticket, and then I will tag Devon to work on it. Devon will draft a full PR for me, and then I'll pull down that PR. I'll review it. I'll actually usually review it in GitHub first, give comments and feedback, and then I'll pull it in if I need to change things. But a good amount of time, I can just do it all in GitHub. And like, it's actually been interesting, the people that are the maximalists versus the kind of the no AI. The maximalists, I usually find, were the engineering managers whose job before was just like writing tickets all day. And they're like, wow, I finished writing the ticket and I got something to review. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's like so much better. And like, I really like that. I was like, damn, I was usually just writing tickets. Like, now I get a result right away. That's great. Versus, it does take a little bit of the flow state. I will acknowledge that. Like, it is a little hard to have it's a different kind of programming experience versus kind of being in the state for things. Usually I'll take a feature and I'll try to build like the first version of it, or like the reproducible block. And then I'll have AI come in and kind of automate it. Once you put those guardrails in place, it's really good then running with it and kind of repetitive tasks on top of things.
Yeah. Okay. And I mean, everyone's going to come to their own conclusion when it comes to AI, but I do think that one of the things that's interesting to me is like if people are worried about their jobs, thinking about who is going to succeed the best if AI does take off the way a lot of people think, and who's going to have the hardest time. And I've been saying for a long time that if AI does become such a deeply important part of the programming community, as most folks seem to be thinking it's going to at this point, the biggest hit will be against the juniors. And the people with most likelihood to be totally fine are engineering managers, senior technical leads, and stuff like that. So,
yeah, it's tough. It'll be interesting to see as kind of people go through the early, like the learning phase. I still think it's important to like learn the fundamentals. And like I remember, like I first picked up Laravel, I was doing Blade templates, and then I added in jQuery, then I did Livewire, and then Inertia, and now so like, I feel like I've done that progression. It's probably hard for like new devs to do that progression. I'm a big fan of not learning React or anything like advanced at first. Like I think you should just do classic server-side apps and just learn how that get comfortable with the mental model of it.
Yeah, totally.
Because you just learn some of these little details, like, oh, this is why this exists versus all this complexity out there. But yeah, I don't think AI is necessarily coming for everyone's jobs. I think it'll enable people to do a whole lot more. I do think, though, there is a very fair concern of companies hiring less for certain sizes of companies. And like this is probably one of the, I remember when we were first hiring our first couple engineers at the last business, we went from one person to 2 to 3. And in my head, I thought, oh, we're going to be 1 times productive. We're going to be 2 times productive. We're going to be 3 times, right? I was like, oh, yeah.
Like, you sweet summer child.
Yeah, right? And I was like, wait, what's happening here? And not only are we not going up, but it's like getting less productive. Like, what? Like, and like, I think that is going to be an interesting thing to see with AI because there's this like management overhead. I'm just like inherent of people talking to one another that like as team sizes grow, it's hard to come around that. And if you could do more with less people, I think companies will kind of optimize around these like groupings of people that can do more, but maybe you'll have more pods of people doing stuff, right?
Yeah, interesting. Are you guys hiring right now? You mentioned kind of like people, if they're interested, can kind of follow you. What's that looking like?
We do have, so on our website, godiagonal.com, we do have a careers page up there, and we have a wildcard role. So I do monitor that. And that's kind of our pool of people that like, okay, maybe we don't have an open role right now. We just finished this wave of folks on board. I expect we're going to ramp up again now in the fall. And we're also going to Laracon, so it'll be fun to meet people. So we do kind of like what you mentioned, like ideally we have a kind of short list of people that we stay in touch with that are interested in working with us. Or, I just like meeting interesting, smart people doing things. So,
Okay. So I'm nearing my wrap up. I got 2 questions, but before I ask my last 2 questions, is there anything you wanted to talk about as you were thinking about this that we didn't get a chance to cover today?
I definitely, on the AI side of things, like I'd encourage everyone, and maybe I think, we've talked about working on putting videos out of how we're using this stuff. Like it truly has been a game changer on night and day for us. So like, and I think the important thing to keep in mind, just like you bring on a new employee to your team, it's going to take a little bit to like, you got to give that person context for how you do things. So like if you invest in it, like we have Docker, we run everything through Docker so that the AI can spin up the same environment exactly as we have and have all of that stuff in there and then stick with the Laravel standards. You get a whole lot of benefits. Like it really has blown my mind. Like we even got rid of Zoom at the company and we switched all to Google just so we can have all of our context there. So like every meeting with customers is now recorded. We got notes we can go across it. Like even this interview where I just asked ChatGPT to prep some questions for me, which was helpful, which is kind of fun. So, I wish I would see some more folks, I think, in the Laravel world just like dive in and do some of that stuff, which I think we're getting there on some of that stuff, which is nice.
Yeah.
Let's see. Yeah, I think that's most of it. Very excited for Laracon. Excited to see where things go. I haven't tried Cloud yet, so we're looking forward to trying Cloud.
Yeah, you're gonna like Cloud. Well, I wanted to ask what you want to plug, but I think one of the things is I know that you guys are doing some things at Laracon, so you could tell like what's Diagonal's presence at Laracon going to look like? Yeah,
we're doing a little happy hour with the mostly technical guys the night before the conference, so that should be fun. There's a little RSVP going around. I think unfortunately there's a waiting list for that, but
yes,
hopefully we'll see a whole lot of folks there. All right, awesome. Excited to see you there. So that'll be a good time. And then I usually like to just keep a low key presence, so we're just gonna be milling around the conference. We got the company started just a few months ago, really. So we don't have a formal booth or anything there, but we'll be walking around in t-shirts. So I'm hoping
also this will be part of your team's first time meeting each other, right?
It is, yeah. So we're flying the whole team in.
Cool.
I'm really excited for that. It'll be fun. We got people all over the world. We got someone in. We've got Canada, Belgium, Ecuador, Brazil, and then the U.S. So all over the place. So it'll be really fun to meet everyone. Yeah,
I love that. Okay. Other than that, is there anything else you want to plug?
I don't think so. So I appreciate you having me on here, Matt.
Of course, I got one more for you. If you were to make, and it's so funny talking to people who've sold businesses before because the answer is always a little different. But if you were to be handed $100 million tax free today, what would you do tomorrow?
I'd be doing the same thing. I'd be doing this right now. And honestly, and it was interesting. We sold the business. I stayed at Zillow for a handful of months. And then I kind of went on a sabbatical. I was like burned out. I was tired. I was like, all right, I'm going to take a break and just kind of do fun stuff. Right. And you kind of sit there and what do you want to do? And it's so interesting because I think you got all these hobbies, go vacation and stuff. The thing I kind of came to at the end of the sabbatical was hobbies are hobbies because they are the hobby. They're what you do not in your main time, And vacations are vacations because it is a break from things. And I very much enjoyed the time. I got an old car that I worked on and I love doing that. And if I had another break, I'd love to go do another car project and whatnot. Yeah. But I also just get a lot of joy from learning and working with people and building things. And kind of where I came to at the end of it was starting a company and doing that again, checks a lot of those boxes for me. And it's such an exciting time right now. Oh, yeah. I'm amped.
I love that, man. I mean, I could see it in your energy. You are definitely very excited about this. So, well, I'm excited to learn more about it as you go. I mean, you and I have spoke a little bit on our own about the project that we haven't even talked about here. And I just know that you're doing a lot of innovative things there. And I am very curious to see kind of where you land, because I feel like you're doing a lot of research that's going to play out for everybody in terms of when you're like, hey, here's what we figured out. And you mentioned you're reading all these papers and stuff, but also just how you're trying to build an application is very unique. So I'm really excited to see where that goes for you. So
I'm excited to get a demo out soon for people to play with. So it would be quite interesting. Thanks for having me on. It's been great chatting, Matt.
Of course. Thank you for hanging out. And for the rest of you, we will see you all next time.